Hello and welcome to part 3 of 5 of this Platform App Builder certification guide. Today we're going to go through business logic and process automation, which is going to take up 28% of your exam. We're going to be going through the bullet points found in the Trailhead exam guide. And just as we've talked about on the Platform App Builder exam, it's all about building and customizing applications on Salesforce. So all of these bullet points will be given an example, and we'll walk through examples of each bullet point and talk about what you need to be familiar with and look forward to on this exam. So let's jump into it. The first bullet point is, given a scenario, demonstrate the use of formula fields to meet stated business requirements. So we want to talk about how you can build formula fields, how you can look across objects on these formula fields, and just what types of limitations you might have. So when you come across a scenario on the exam, you know answer should be formula field in this scenario. So most of this video, we're going to be in a free developer org and walking through scenarios. So in this case, we want to talk about formula fields. Now, what I want to talk about, in order to be able to look cross object with these formula fields, we need to have relationships between the objects. And now it's important to note the types of relationships that certain objects can have with one another. So the scenario I want to go through is using formula fields to create some sort of contact scoring based off of the account ICP, or the ideal customer profile. So because there's already a relationship between the contact and the account, because on the contact, there needs to actually be an account listed, which is that lookup field looking at the account, we're able to pull in fields from the account into the contact for this formula field. So as I mentioned, we're going to be in our developer org here quite a bit, and we want to go ahead and build out these formulas to talk about this scenario of wanting to have certain data points from the account live on the contact and have some formula fields there. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to go into the setup side here, and we're going to go to build formula fields on the contact. The formula fields always have to live on the object where you want to surface the information. So the scenario I want to go through is, I want to have a scoring model on the contact based off of account information. So because there's already that lookup relationship between the contact and the account, I can pull in data from the account into a contact formula. It's not necessary to have any sort of flows input that information. I can simply have a formula field because of that relationship between those objects. And that relationship, if we look here in the contact side, we have here that account ID, right? That lookup. So if I'm on any account, or if I'm on any contact, there's already that relationship in place that is right here, that edge communications. So that means with a formula field, I can pull in information from the account down into the contact and have that information live on the contact and be able to have calculations on the contact because of that. So we're going to go through just a quick example of why this could be a formula field and why it doesn't need to be a flow. Formula fields are much easier than putting together a flow, as you can do this straight in Object Manager. We're going to go through a quick example here. We're going to say here that we want a scoring model on the contact based on the account revenue. So we want to simplify this. We want to go ahead and create a formula field here on the contact. We're going to have it as a formula, and we want it to output as, we'll have it output as a text because we want to make sure that it's very easy for the reps to recognize what it is. So we're going to say account scoring revenue. And so I want to pull fields from the accounts and bring it onto the contact. So what I want to do here, in this case, I'll do a nested if statement, just very simple one here. And we'll have it like this, just to close this out. And the info that we want to put in this nested if statement is part of that account revenue. So again, I can look into the contact or into the account based off of that relationship. And I want to see if on the account, if the revenue is greater than, we'll say 1 million, we want to go ahead and set this as type A revenue. Great. And then if the account is going to be, we'll say between 500,000 and a million, we'll set that as type B, just to have this as a pretty quick example here. So let me grab this. Again, we want it if it is greater than 500,000. but also less than 1 million. So we'll say less than 1 million. I'm gonna go ahead and put these together, make sure that they are bracketed. We want to set this as type B, and anything else we want to leave as blank. So I'm gonna go ahead and check syntax on this. And, let me put a comma here, and should be good to go there. Great. So now I have this that's going to be pulling over and just giving the reps very easy. Here's a type A revenue, a type B revenue based on the account. So again, what's important on this is not necessary to create a flow because we have that easy lookup relationship between contacts and accounts. So that lookup relationship, that relationship is extremely important when you're creating formula fields across objects. Now, if you wanted a formula even simpler on the same object, so if I wanted to create on the account an account scoring based off of the revenue, based off the industry that's already on the account, that's a simple formula field. We do not need any flows, and really, it's not applicable for a lot of the other automations, right? You don't really can't do anything with an approval process, validation rules. None of that will help. This is talking about making calculations and formulas based on the data that's already within the system. So this is a scenario, you'll come across lots of questions talking about this. How can I get from point A to point B? And in this scenario, we need those simple calculations on objects that already have direct relationships. And so from the contact, looking at the account, or the opportunity looking at the account, very easy to do. As well as custom object to custom object or custom object to standard object, as long as there is that relationship that you're able to do that. Now I will highlight here, there is a nice trailhead here on using formula fields. I recommend you go through it, go through the examples here. Just helpful to go through, make sure you know how to build formulas. And know that cross-object relationship, and in the scenarios when you need to use formula fields as opposed to other more complex automations. Now, the second bullet point is, given a scenario, determine the capabilities, use cases, and implications of roll-up summary fields. Roll-up summary fields are amazing, amazing tools in Salesforce. It's essentially a formula field that can already be built for you based on, this is very important, based on relationships between objects. So to cover that quickly, there is just a wonderful help article that I'll link as well that talks about how you can set up roll-up summary fields. Again, important to note right here is how you can create those. As it says here, any custom object that is a master side, master detail, etc., etc. Really, it's master detail relationships. What I mean by that is that the child cannot exist without the parent. For example, an opportunity to account. That is a very common roll up use case in rolling up opportunity revenue on the account level. Very, very common. Again, make sure that you understand when formula fields, as we just went over, this formula fields cross object versus the roll up summary field. So this help article is wonderful on how you can do that and just how you can manage those as well. So I'll link this, very important here. Let's build one here quickly just to show you the process and be familiar with the filters that are in place and how you can build those. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and build that on the account. And what I wanna do here is I actually wanna build it and see what type of, let's say closed won revenue is living on the account based on all opportunities available. So I'm gonna go ahead on the account level, I'm gonna hit new, and I'm gonna do right here this roll up summary. Right here it says here, a read-only field that displays the sum, minimum, or maximum value of a field in a related list, or the record count of all records listed in a related list. So wonderful, you can do again that sum, count, or minimum or maximum. Very, very important, those 4 different criteria of these roll-up summaries you can do. So as I said, I'm gonna say closed won revenue. And this is gonna look at all opportunities on this account. And so what I wanna do, this is the master object where it lives. Now what's the object I wanna summarize? That's gonna be the opportunities. You'll notice here that, for example, I'm not able to do this with contacts. because it has that different relationship, right? Opportunities have to stay at the account. And so that's how I can roll up this information. So now I'm rolling up my opportunity. Here's my 4 options. I could count how many opportunities there are with certain criteria. I can sum certain fields or find the minimum or maximum. In this case, I want to sum, and I want to sum the amount, but I only want to sum not just all records. I want to sum all records that are sitting in closed one. So I want to say the stage equals, and we're going to say closed one. And so just like that, I have created that roll up summary field on the account looking at all closed one revenue from opportunities. So very important tool that you want to understand the scenarios. Again, this is a wonderful, wonderful help article here from Salesforce talking about just the different requirements that need to be in place in order to do so. It has best practices down here. I'll make sure this is linked. Read through this, be familiar with this, and you'll be just fine on this part of the exam. Third bullet point is, given a scenario, demonstrate the use of validation rules to meet stated business requirements. So validation rules are wonderful tools within Salesforce. They help you validate data. They're rules you put in place to help validate data to make sure that you help guide users of Salesforce and help them follow a specific process with these rules in place. So very common examples here that I'll talk about a scenario is making sure that reps and users of Salesforce have important data at important milestones of Salesforce. Very, very common is making sure that in the opportunity, in the process, moving through stages, that certain fields are filled out before they move to certain stages. So if there's a question that says, what tool should you use in order to require users to have certain fields filled out before they move to different stages of an opportunity, you know that it's going to be a validation rule. This is once again talking about validating the data of an opportunity, the integrity of the data before it advances down the pipeline. This is very, very common on the Platform App Builder exam to make sure that you understand these scenarios. Validating data, ensuring data is there, is either going to be on a validation rule or as a required field. But we know that required fields are required on creation of a record. Validation rules you can have enacted and enforced anytime a record is edited according to your rules. So in this case, we'll create just a simple validation rule. And so I'm gonna go ahead and create that validation rule to make sure that the amount is on the opportunity before anyone tries to close one this opportunity. So I'm gonna say close one requirements. And so I can go ahead and I can add fields later on here. But in this case, I want to make sure that it triggers on when the opportunity is changed to close one. So I'm going to go ahead and put, first I'm going to put is changed. I'm going to put stage name. Great. And now I want to make sure that it is put in the closed one, right? So I have the is pick val stage name. And in this case, I'm going to put closed one. Great. And then next, I want to make sure, is there an amount? This is the important part. So it's saying, okay, is the stage updated and is it pushed to close one, and is the amount blank? So I'm going to put in here is blank amount. And then I'm going to close that out. And there would be no errors here. And we're going to go ahead and test this. But again, this is what validation rules are used for, to validate data during the use of records or during the edit of records. This isn't going to be done with other tools. And so whenever you see on the test, what tool you need to validate data or to ensure that data is in a Salesforce record at a certain point in time, always going to be your validation rules. So let me go ahead and just save this and put this out. Say, please input amount before moving. Great, and I'll just put that at the top of the page. And let's just go test this real quick. So let me go jump on an opportunity here. And just to show what that looks like, this amount, I'm going to go ahead and clear that out. And now I'm going to try to close one that. So this is how the validation rule is now going to fire. It says, please input amount before moving to close one. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and put in amounts. Now I can go ahead and pass this validation rule and able to mark it as close one. So that is what a validation is used for. That's the scenarios, again, to validate the integrity of data that you need within a Salesforce record at any point in time. As always, biggest help for you is going to be building. Getting into a developer org, build out some validation rules, try to break them, try to make sure you have a good guide of validation rules to validate the data that needs to be put on records as they have certain edits and certain advancements, particularly on the opportunity. Make sure that you build a few of those and you'll be just fine on this part of the exam, making sure that you understand when to use validation rules to make sure that data is in there at the right time. Fourth bullet point is, given a scenario, determine the capabilities and use cases for approval processes. So we'll talk first about when approval processes need to be used, and then we'll build one out and talk about the important things that you may see on the test and things that approval processes are able to do. So approval processes should be pretty clear on when you need them, as opposed to flows or process builders or validation rules or formula fields. Approval processes is to make sure that someone is aware and has to actually put their stamp of approval for something to happen within Salesforce. Whether it is advancing an opportunity to a certain stage or marking as closed one, or it has a certain amount threshold, you want managers to be aware of that and to approve whatever the rep is trying to do. Those are very, very common examples of approval processes. And so to know when they're used, I hope is a little more simple, right? It's as simple as that. Have a process in place for a record that requires approval to have something happen to it, whether it's an edit, whether it's a stage movement, etc. Now, what's important is to make sure you build these out so you're aware of the actions that approval processes can take and how you can build multi-step and just different settings that you're going to need to know in here for the capabilities of approval processes. So I want to go ahead and jump in back in my developer org, and I want to go over to approval processes. And let's go ahead and just build one out here a little bit to make sure that we understand everything that can be done here. So I'm going to put one in place. In this case, I'll put another one on the opportunity. Just go through a pretty common process here. We're going to go ahead and create it. And I'm going to call this, we'll just call this opportunity approval. We don't have any templates in place. And so what I want to do here is use this really the entry criteria, right? The entry criteria is, let's say that the amount is now greater than or equal to, we'll say $100 million. So this is a pretty big, important deal for this for this record. And so we want to make sure as soon as this happens that some notifications go out and there's some approval that the rep that's assigned to it can actually work it. So here's an important thing: select approver. We want to either let the submitter choose the approver manually. So when they input this data, they're able to actually approve, or they're able to set the approver themselves. We can have it set as the hierarchy on the role. So for example, it could be the manager on the user's record, or we automatically assign based off of, different people, whether it's first response or unanimous from a queue, right? So I could have the user, whether it's approved or rejected on first response, I could set this up as, related users. I could put this as a manager. I could add several here. What's important is to know that you can have it unanimous or as the first response. These two settings are quite important here. But in this case, I'll just have the individual put it manually just so we can move on here. And so here I am on my approval process, right? What I want to do here is now set up, what type of actions are in place. So what's important is the automatic action is a record lock. So when that initial submission happens for an approval process, we have the record that it's going to be locked down on the initial submission action. And so it's locked down immediately. Now, what I can do on the initial submission action, are these actions here. I can create a task. So I can create a task for maybe whoever is assigned to approve this. I can create a task for the actual submitter to say, hey, make sure you follow up with whoever should be approving. I can send out an email alerts. I can make a field update, maybe that is waiting approval on the record, as well as an outbound message. So these are important. The different actions that can happen on the approval, as well as the different steps here, right? So we can have multiple steps in place. So right now there's just one step. It's whoever is manually chosen to do this, and whether they reject or approve, what actions can take place. Now, keep in mind, they're always going to be the same, the actions. So whether it's an approval or rejection, we're going to have the same actions, whether it is a task that's created and sent out, an email alerts, a field update, or an outbound message. Really, the important parts, make sure that you build these out, is what happens on the initial submission, which is that record lock. The different steps, in scenarios, how can I create multiple steps? What would actually happen in the scenario that I have multiple steps? So let's say I have 2 steps and I'm requiring 2-step approval. So what's that look like? A scenario is, we have this amount that is $1 million, and we need to make sure that first the manager approves it, and then let's say that even the head of sales or the VP of sales also approves it. What would that look like? Is that a unanimous approval process, or is it a 2-step approval process? So make sure that you're familiar with how to build out approval processes, because you're going to see different scenarios on whether it is, the unanimous or multi-step, as well as just how approval processes can be approved. There's a great resource that I'll link, is the approval process help article. So as you build out approval processes, again, make sure that you're familiar with the different multi-steps, unanimous, delegated approvers. And this help article goes through a lot of that. Make sure that you understand different scenarios, some sample approval processes, and how you can create custom reports on approval processes instances if you have quite a few in your org, et cetera, et cetera. So again, make sure that you build one out, understand the initial submission actions and how you can create additional, what it looks like to have multiple approval steps, and then what happens on the final approval actions, rejection, and recall, right? Build out some and make sure that you go through this help article, and you should be really good on this section. Approval processes should be very clear on when to use them. In the test, it'll be more so, what can they do? What are the capabilities? What are the limitations? We just went through quite a few. Build some out, understand the things that we've gone through in this section here, and you'll do great. 5th bullet point is, given a scenario, determine the tool or action needed to meet business requirements. So in this case, we just want to have a good understanding of the different tools that are available. We've gone through several. We've gone through formula fields, validation rules, approval processes. Now we want to maybe dive into a little bit of flows in terms of automations that can be done, and really just which tool is going to be used. So we've gone through great examples, right? Validating data, making sure data is there. That's your validation rules. Making sure that managers have a say in certain records passing through the pipeline. We know that that's going to be an approval process. And really anything that is in terms of updating fields and making sure that maybe more complex processes is always going to be flows. Salesforce is trying to get away from workflow rules and process builders, and so flows. So again, this isn't anything new from the Salesforce admin exam. You should have a good foundational knowledge of the differences between the tools. Now, as I mentioned, the Platform App Builder, it's about building these solutions. So just by determining the tool, make sure that you know the limitations of each tool, when to use the different tools. We've gone through quite a few already. Make sure that you understand when to use a certain tool. Now, a few other tools or actions that you want to be familiar with in terms of recommending the right solution. You want to be talking about record types, escalation rules, and even assignment rules. So understand how these are used, particularly record types, when they're used, as well as escalation rules and assignment rules, and what objects use escalation rules and assignment rules as well. Your familiarity with these tools will help you make sure you understand any scenario that can come up on the exam. Now, the sixth and final bullet point of this section of the exam is, given a set of business requirements, recommend a solution to automate business processes while avoiding errors in automation. Now, really, this is the big one of this section, because you want to have a holistic understanding of not only what tool to use, but how you can build solutions, which may involve several tools that we've already discussed. And so really the best help that you're going to get here are going to be practice exams. And whenever, this is my number one rule, whenever you're taking a practice exam, take your time to have the question in front of you and go ahead and build the different options that are available on that question to make sure that you get to the right answer. And I say that because this is very hard to just talk conceptually about in a video, because you're talking about scenarios and could be quite complex scenarios. And so you want to understand, okay, in this scenario, do I need a record type and different page layouts? Do I need to assign a default record type on lead conversion? What are the different options that this question is giving me? And let's go ahead and build and see if this even makes sense, or is it completely off? Talking about record types and approval processes, how is that even possible in the same question? So make sure to take your time, not only on practice tests, but on the exam itself, to think through and visualize how you would build this. Again, not super helpful in a video to be able to talk through complex scenarios. There are several great practice tests on Trailhead himself. They have a wonderful walkthrough as well. There is a refresh here, refresh on business logic and process automation. So for example, if I come down here looking at some test questions here, we're talking here, a sales representative at Universal Containers is a delegated approver for his manager's approval processes. The sales representative wants to be able to respond to approval requests through email. What permission do they need to have to meet this requirement? So we're talking through what requirements are needed for a delegated approver to do it through email. So the first one is, a user needs API-enabled permissions on their profile or assigned permission set. The user needs system administrator profile assigned. The user needs email-enabled approval permission on their profile or assigned permission set, or the user needs approvals for email permission on their profile or assigned permission set. This is a great example. Understand what the options are. So in my mind, I would want to see, are these even options on a profile or permission set? Can I even have an API-enabled permission? Is that a real one? Is there an email-enabled approvals? Is there an approvals for email permission? And do I think system administrator? Really, not every user is going to be a system administrator. So I'm knocking this one out now, but I want you to go through a profile and look, hey, is there API-enabled permission here? What does that mean? Is there an email-enabled approval? What does that mean? And is there an approval for email permission? Because that's how you're going to get the answer, is going in yourself and making sure that you understand all the options available. And I'm hitting on this hard on this bullet point of the exam because this is a very scenario-based exam. And this bullet point in particular wants you to think through complex problems and recommend a solution. Not just know which tool you may need, but understand the solution that needs to be in place, the different permissions, the different tools that you can put together in order to help get this business requirement completed with your Salesforce knowledge. Now, the last help article I want to give you is this Salesforce Automation Best Practice Guide. It's going to go through really just best practices across different automations, as well as at the end, it's going to give you a scenario to think through and make sure that you're understanding just what you may look out for. Right here, it has this great the Cloud Kicks example. So this is a wonderful page here, this help article. I'll link it as well. This wraps up this section of the Platform App Builder exam, Business Logic and Process Automation. I hope this has been helpful, going through scenarios and talking through what to look out for and what you need to practice and build. That's what this test is all about, being able to build solutions based off of scenarios. So I know business logic and process automation, there's a lot to cover, the different tools. Please make sure that you understand when to use certain tools and what they can do, and make sure that you build on that experience as you get into a developer org and look to build solutions. And you'll do great on this part of the exam. Please let me know through the comments if you have any questions or any scenarios that you're struggling with as you study for this exam. Best of luck, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.